This is the CHGO Cubs podcast. My name is Corey. I am joined, as always, by Brendan. We are coming to you on Sunday, April 21st, and the Cubs, Brendan, split with the Miami Marlins. They drop the finale on Sunday by a score of 6-3. And we have plenty to talk about. So, as always, like to lay out a little bit of the agenda for you today. Obviously, we will talk a little bit about Adbert Alzolay, who was not the closer on Sunday. The Cubs didn't need a closer on Sunday, but he obviously removed for now from the highest of leverage spots. We'll talk about that, what's going on with him, Craig Counsell's comments, who should be closing the next time the Cubs have a save opportunity. We will talk about Christopher Morel. Nice hit in his last plate appearance, I believe, of the game on Sunday, but not a good stretch for him. We will talk about Miguel Amaya and his role and how the Cubs are handling the catcher situation. We'll talk a little bit about Kyle Hendricks. We got another look at him this weekend. And red hot, Brendan, Nico Hoerner.
Red hot.
Red hot.
Red hot.
So plenty to talk about, Brendan, but throwing to you generally here, a lot going on in this series. I know there is a lot that our YouTube chat is going to want to talk about, etc. In general, though, when a team comes to your house having won 4 games all season and they leave your house having won 6 games on the season, not so great.
Not the best. I would have liked a better outcome. What can you do? This is how baseball works. Unfortunately, we succumb ourselves to this possibility every single weekend, but things could be worse. We are 13-9. The hitting overall, the depth appears to be quite strong still, even with some of the slumps you're talking about. Nico is emerging from that cold stretch, and around the corner, we have Justice Steele maybe coming back, and we have a lot to talk about. So there are a lot of good positives, despite the annoying trends and some of the concerning ones I'm sure we'll get into.
Yeah, and all told, after a good series in Arizona earlier this week and taking at least 2 of these games from the Marlins, the Cubs sitting at 13-9, so certainly worse places to be. But yeah, so we are going to have plenty to talk about. There's a lot of places to start, Brendan, but I think we might as well just jump in on the Nico Hoerner thing. That was one of the things I really wanted to talk about first.
Well, Corey, you know me well.
I do know you well, but Nico, a very good example. Last week, his OPS, I think, was sitting in the 600s. And we were talking about, he obviously made some changes or was hoping to make some adjustments to add a little bit more slug, a little bit more power in this offseason, and started off quite slow, in some ways uncharacteristic for Nico, just in terms of how he looked at the plate, things like that. Talk about shifting the narrative very, very quickly. Nico looks excellent at the plate. And I think I said last week, whatever he's doing with the adjustments, whatever he's trying to do, he is too good of a hitter when he has too good of control of his bat and understanding of the zone and understanding of the MLB pitching. He will figure it out. Whatever he's trying to work on, he will figure it out. And of course, now we sit here and his slash line on the season is 289, 389, 395. He's got a 356 WOBA and a 124 WRC plus. Looks phenomenal. And he's doing those little Nico things where he's swinging and hitting pitches where you go, how did he hit that? Like the one in Arizona that was up above
6 feet above his head.
He turned on one today that I think he took foul, but it was way, off the plate. Like how he managed to hit it that hard, even though it was foul, he looks phenomenal right now.
With hitters like Nico, especially early on in the season, to your point, you have to trust their process. Nico, of course, started the year whiffing more than he showed in years past, a contact rate under 80%. But at the same time, he was chasing at fewer pitches. So there was this weird dual observation to reconcile. In one way, it was great to see him not chasing so many pitches, but at the same time, the whiffs were too much. And that was something that had to change. Now, if you look in the past 10 days in his last 30 to 40 plate appearance sample, contact rate back up to close to 90%. That's where Nico hangs out. That's where Nico has his success. In the process, he is more aggressive. He has been more aggressive, swinging at pitches outside the zone more than he did in the first 10 games. Chase rate around 30 to 33%. League average is around 30%. This is what players do with the natural ebbs and flow of the year. They adjust, they tinker with new adjustments that may or may not work, and they go through their process. And sometimes hits fall, gets guys going, and it propels them to this stretch that we're seeing. It's really encouraging to see, and it's not to be unexpected. Of course, when we start the season, we zoom in and we want to look at what's happening in the first few games as a reason to project the entire season. But it is a nice reminder for myself to just stay patient, stay calm, don't overreact, and see how things change the next few weeks.
Yeah, and looking at our live YouTube chat, if you're in our live YouTube chat, hop in, drop a comment, say hello. Obviously, if you're listening on your podcast feeds later, hello. We're happy to have you as well. A good, and something to think about, perhaps. Obviously, we've seen Craig Counsell change the lineups a lot. Ian Happ has been your leadoff hitter when he's hitting from the left side. We've seen Nico up there a good bit. Tyler in the YouTube chat with a solid point that he's been leading off a bit more now, obviously leading off with Happ out, and has that coincided with more of Nico looking like himself. I like Happ a lot when he's hitting lefty in that leadoff spot. I think he's a great OBP guy. I've been very pleased with that, but I do think it is an interesting point of discussion that, Nico has been in that leadoff spot a lot over the last, year plus. Is he more comfortable there? Is that a spot that he just thrives in, or as the two hitter, wherever he's been? Interesting thing to consider now that he looks red hot and much more like himself. We're still waiting on the official diagnosis and length that Ian Happ might be out, or what
He was
exactly.
running pregame, looked
Mhm.
pretty good.
Yeah.
Didn't seem as if it was a huge
So,
concern.
but we'll see. I do think it's a fair thought. Sometimes guys are more comfortable, and I like the flexibility that Counsell has shown, but definitely something to consider that, maybe certain guy, maybe Nico's a guy who likes getting up there early and getting his hacks in. We'll see. But the main point, Nico looks phenomenal. He had a great game on Sunday. Did his best, Brendan, to try to will that Cubs offense to victory there, but it was not
He
to be.
tried. He tried.
So I do want to transition to what I guess is maybe the chat is on fire about Kyle Hendricks. We will talk about Kyle Hendricks. We will talk about Brendan, who will relentlessly defend Kyle. No, I'm kidding.
Well, I think I've offended Eli, which, listen, I get it. Eli, thank you for joining in. We'll talk about it. I
We'll talk
appreciate the
about
concern.
Hendricks.
I'm
Yes.
concerned too, of course.
I see the setup man in our YouTube chat.
Hello,
Hello.
Kyle.
Happy to see you, Kyle. Let's talk about Alzolay. Let's talk about the closer situation. Let's talk about what's going on there. Brendan, I know you have a graph to dig in specifically on what is going on with Adbert Alzolay, his pitches, and what might be causing some of the issues. On a broader perspective, though, if you've listened to, I think definitely you and I know I've heard Cody, our guy Cody Delmendo, talk about it before. We've had discussions of if this team was very seriously competing for a World Series. We're getting down to the end of the year. You're getting your bullpen ready, et cetera, et cetera. I know I have said before that I don't think Alzolay is a closer on a serious World Series contending team. He does not get enough whiffs. We've seen him overcome certain issues. He had the issue where basically at one point in his career, every lefty that stepped up against him was depositing the ball in the stands. He figured out how to move beyond that and make some adjustments, but 4 blown saves. We are 22 games into the season.
That's good math. Nice.
Quick. I didn't even use my
That was
hands.
fast.
That is trouble. And for a team that is not going to blow teams out every day, we've seen a lot of good stuff from this Cubs offense, but they are not a team that you can rely on to just put up 8 runs a game and blow teams out. We'll get into it too, but this is also compounded by the fact that pretty much none of their starters seem to be able to go past the 5th inning. You need a closer that gets more whiffs and just is more overpowering and dominant. There is, I think, 2 separate discussions. Who should be the closer? And then also what is Alzolay's role? Because of course, Adbert Alzolay was one of the better relievers in baseball last year. He put up very good numbers. He was very good for the most part. Obviously, he has struggled, but this isn't like he can't be effective or any type of that conversation. He's got some stuff he's going to have to adjust and work on, but he's a very good reliever. He's shown that he can do that. Is he a closer? I have always not really been the biggest believer in that, despite being a big fan of Alzolay. The question then, though, Brendan, turns to who would you like to see get those opportunities? Just looking through the chat right away, I see some suggestions of Neris, a veteran, getting that opportunity. I've seen Ben Brown's name thrown around, Hayden Wisniewski's name thrown around, Cade Horton, possibly what the Cubs are doing there. I know he was pitching today. They're monitoring his pitch counts and things like that. But I do agree kind of generally, and then I'll throw it to you, Brendan, with Tyler's point again in the YouTube chat. I don't know if they have one. So I think this might be kind of a day-to-day, are righties coming up? Are lefties coming up? Do you want ground balls? Do you want fly balls? It might be Craig Counsell having to figure this out on the fly, because a Devin Williams or a Josh Hader, unless somebody really develops or comes up and you take a shot, that person is not walking through those bullpen doors. So you're going to have to figure it out some other way. So I'll throw it to you. Firstly, let's talk about who should close games immediately on this team, and then we can dig into what's going on with Alzolay.
If the concern on your end, which I share, is lack of whiffs, I don't believe right now Neris is that guy. Neris is going through some growing pains to start the season, and his whiff rate is actually similar to Alzolay's whiff rate, around 23%, which is worse than league average for a closer. So if we just go by whiffs, Neris is probably not going to fit your desire. Now, if you go by command and the ability to get whiffs, I think the number one candidate right now is probably Mark Leiter. Now, how sustainable is that is the question. But with Leiter, he has the heavy sweep. He has the splitter that offsets platoon splits, which means for a 9th inning guy or a multi-inning 8th, bridging to the 9th, which is what Counsell has tried to do with Alzolay, Leiter seems to be one of those guys that can fill that void in the current immediate void. Long term, though, this team needs relievers where you don't squint at and think, man, can he do this long term? Is he going to get enough whiffs? And that, to me, only is going to be filled through a trade around hopefully June or July. Now, the question then becomes, can Alzolay return to that closer role that he succeeded at last year? Now, there's been mentions of Clase from Cleveland as one of those closer candidates. Clase is awesome. And in fact, he was very similar in effectiveness to Alzolay last year. And the reason for the similarity is both Clase and Alzolay had incredible command. Clase, over a 3-year sample, is at a walk rate of 2 or under 2 batters per 9 innings, similar to what Alzolay did last year. Also similar is that Clase and Alzolay don't get many whiffs either. If you like strikeouts, if you like whiffs, Clase is probably not going to fit your desire either. So then the question becomes, well, do you want to give up heavy prospects for a reliever who doesn't get his outs, by a whiz, but rather gets his outs with among the best command of any reliever and stability from a year-to-year standpoint? It's a difficult question, and it's a difficult thing to project long term.
Well, just to jump in here, I'm not sure if you were going to say this, but Manuel in the YouTube chat making this point. The Guardians right now are 16-6 in first place in the AL Central.
So
You're,
that
you're
may
not
not
you're not
happen.
getting their closer at the moment. I mean, you
Yeah.
get to the deadline, who knows? But they're off to a good start. I would imagine they're looking to figure out how to get better, not trade their closer. So
Yeah. Well, that's going to be the problem. There may be candidates who you think are going to be available, and they come around the deadline, they may not be available. I will say it's concerning. It's concerning to not have the high volume of potential heavy strikeout guys. Ben Brown was suggested. Ben Brown might be best used in a multi-inning role right now, and he's a rookie and going through growing pains and perhaps a league adjustment as well. So it's not a certainty. It is a possibility long term, but it's hard to say right now. Council will have to figure this out. He'll have to go through the iteration process, try guys in and out of roles. Maybe you put Neris in that ninth inning spot like they did on Saturday to nudge a change the brain, change the environment, get guys going. And that may be what Council ultimately has to figure out and do over the next week.
yeah, I think that's what we're likely to see. I think we're going to see somewhat of a closer by committee. You do have some good guys to try out, and they're going to have to sort through their starting situation as well, as we all know. Taillon is back; he looked pretty good the other day. I do want to ask you about that now that we've seen him for the first time.
Yeah.
But just to finish up on the Alzolay conversation, and then we'll jump into our first ad break here. Craig Counsell before the game, I'm reading this quote from our guy Jared Willis, who was at Wrigley Field for CHGO this afternoon. You can check out his work, obviously, at allchgo.com. Pre-game, he said he did not plan to use him as the closer on Sunday, and the goal was to give him some confidence. Counsell goes on to say, quote, "That comes from success. That comes from some good outings. That comes from getting some good feedback after an outing and from the hitters." So Alzolay did go out there on Sunday. He did have a nice inning of work. It was obviously in lower leverage. The Cubs were down by 3, not a save situation, not a hold situation like that. So nice to see, because regardless of whether the plan in Counsell's mind is to get back to a point where Alzolay is your closer, doesn't matter. You need him to be an effective reliever for you. He was very important to this team last year, and he is going to be very important for this team this year. So whether that role is now in the 7th or 8th inning, or if the plan is to work him back to being the closer, you got to get him right. You need him right so that he is a reliable arm that can get you 3 outs at a time. So when we come back from our first break, did you have anything more to add on that? And then we'll do your graphs too when we come back.
Yeah. I'll show a quick graph and I'll do the break because I think, the
We'll
chat
just
is
finish on
asking.
Alzolay here.
Yeah. Then we'll move on. But the chat is asking, differences about Alzolay. Now, it's a multifaceted development over the years, and I'll keep it brief. But Alzolay's success as a closer is a result of command and a new slider that he developed last season with Daniel Moskow's. The slider that he developed was designed to offset platoon splits. This is what Moskow's told Ryan Herrera and I last season. The slider is 88 miles per hour, and it has more of a north to south profile. Moskow's described it as a dropper, not a sweeper. In addition to that dropper, he has a cutter. He has a more sweepy, or as Alzolay told us, a bigger slider. 3 breaking pitches. Now, if you look at those 3 breaking pitches this year, on the top of this graph is 2023. You can see from left to right is less sweep to more sweep. You can see that the cutter, slider, and sweeper from 2023 has more horizontal sweep differentiation. Now, if you look in 2024, the cutter has more sweep, the slider has more sweep, and doesn't use the bigger slider or sweeper, as he may call it, that often. But even that pitch is lacking that sweep. He's lacking that overall horizontal differentiation among 3 different breaking pitches that he showed last year. Regardless of the classification system used here, that red circle that you're seeing Those are the dropping sliders that Moscow needs Alzolay to throw to get lefties out and to offset those platoon splits. That circle is a slider around 88 miles per hour. And you can see in 2024, few of those pitches this year, whereas in 2023, it was almost right in the center of that bullseye. That's where Alzolay needs to return. Now, if you look at what this appears like, if you're in batter's box here, on the left is his 3 different breaking pitches. Don't worry about the colors. These are just 3 different breaking pitches. On 2024, you can see there's less differentiation in the movement profile. So Alzolay does not appear to have at least that movement profile difference among his 3 breaking pitches. Then the question becomes, well, can he get feel for this back? I texted a pitching coach. I said, look into this for me. I don't know anything about getting feel for these breakers. He told me it can be difficult. It's going to take a lot of effort. It's not impossible, but in the current going, it will take a significant effort. Alzolay is one of those guys who's shown throughout his career the ability to make those significant efforts and to change how he goes about his overall repertoire. So I have confidence he can do it. At the same time, I'm a little hesitant and apprehensive that he can do it within the next week, 2-3 weeks.
Yeah.
And maybe some guys do have problems getting his overall feel back. So it's difficult to project, but at least in the current going, that appears to be one of the culprits, or unless the interpretation that I'm seeing.
Yeah, tough. And as we saw from Taillon last year, when you lose feel on certain pitches or they're not moving the way that you want them to, that is a very difficult thing to fix once the season has gotten going. And you're, in Alzolay's case, now they've moved him from that, but you're trying to get that feel back, trying to close a 1-run game. It's not a particularly easy thing. So let's hit our first ad break here, and then we will come back and talk about Kyle Hendricks.
Okay. First ad break here is from our new sponsor, Illinois pork producer. People who are active need more protein than the average American. In fact, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, Dietitians of Canada, and the American College of Sports Medicine recommend 1.2 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day for athletes, depending on their training. So for a 150-pound person, that's about 81 to 136 grams of protein per day. 1 3-ounce serving of pork provides 23 grams of high-quality protein that can help active individuals build and preserve muscle. So elevate your protein game with lean pork, a powerhouse of natural goodness. Savor the flavor, savor the gains, and celebrate any occasion by enjoying the best pork produced by Illinois pig farmers. From your sausage and bacon for breakfast to pulled pork or juicy chops for hot off the grill, it's an entire season dedicated to pork and the people behind the product. This is paid for by the Illinois pork producers. Generations of commitment. Baseball season's here. We've seen lots of roller coaster drama to begin the first 3 weeks. Don't miss your chance to add your favorite players from the diamond in your prize pick entries, whether strikeouts, RBIs, or first inning runs. Take your pick of more or less and add them to your prize pick entry today. And basketball playoffs have begun. Get in on the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money on prize picks as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level during basketball's postseason. Go to prizepicks.com/CHGO and use CHGO for a first-time deposit. Match up to $100. If you think Nico Hoerner is going to get more base hits, maybe get 2 base hits against the Astros coming up, go ahead and use Prize Picks and use that code CHGO. Again, prizepicks.com/CHGO. Use code CHGO. Pick more, pick less. It is that easy.
All right, y'all. So I am reading from our guy, Jared Willis, who again was at Wrigley Field for ALLCITY.com this afternoon. We do have some good news on the Justin Steele front. You may have seen videos circulating on social media of him throwing live at Wrigley Field this afternoon. The follow-up report post-game, again, this from our guy, Jared Willis, on Twitter. Craig Counsell said Steele's BP went really well today, and his next step will be pitching in game action in extended spring training in Arizona on Friday. So that's good news, Brendan. That's nice to see that progress coming along quickly. And it does appear that hopefully, as long as each step in this process continues to go well, we're looking at the shorter end of the initial kind of prognosis. When we saw Steele leave the game in Texas, obviously easy to kind of worry and not sure how long he would work back from that. So again, still only throwing an extended spring, probably a rehab assignment in Iowa or something to follow that. So definitely steps. You still need to see everything still feeling good, no setbacks, etc. But this is a nice, that's good news. Things are going well. Things are progressing well. Justin looks good.
We need starting pitching depth
Do they?
deeper into games.
Yes.
Anyone who provides that is going to be a welcome addition back. And even then, there's questions with Steele's injury. At what point in time can he achieve a 6-7 inning start? Is there going to be some breaks when he comes back to preserve that hamstring? Those are the questions I'm looking for.
Yeah.
At some point, though, we're going to need those 7 inning starts. What Kyle's doing, what the back end of the staff have been doing with 4 or 5 innings is just, it's not sustainable. It's going to fatigue an already stressed out bullpen.
Yes. So let's get into it. Let's talk about the rotation. We'll talk about the rotation as a whole, and Kyle Hendricks will be part of that. We spent a good bit of time on Kyle Hendricks last week. I don't want to belabor it too much, but obviously we continue to get more sample from that. So obviously in this series, just looking at how these games played out, on Friday, they get 5 from Taillon. He throws 73 pitches. Obviously, they're easing him back in, so not just, letting him cut it loose. He'll be able to throw 100 pitches, obviously, rather soon. But for his first start, they kept it there. Good outing. We'll leave it there. In game 1 on Saturday, they get 4 2/3 from Javier Assad on 87 pitches, 3 walks there. And 3 Ks, 6 from Shota Imanaga in the nightcap on 92 pitches. And then on Sunday, 4 from Kyle Hendricks on just 56 pitches. So you need more length. That is the cut and dry, immediate takeaway. We've also seen Jordan Wicks, who did not pitch in this weekend series, have some shorter outings as well. Now, part of that we discussed even coming into the year. It was something that we were a little concerned about before Justin Steele hit the injured list, that you had a few guys who this is their first full year starting in a big league rotation. They don't even have a full year sample of starting and relieving at the MLB level, younger guys, things like that. So you need room to allow for those adjustments, those growing pains, kind of figuring out MLB hitters, adjusting to their new schedule, yada, yada, yada. That compounds when your Cy Young candidate and best pitcher gets hurt 4 innings into the season. Now, that burden of going deep into games, saving the bullpen, having those great outings, it shifts to younger guys or a guy like Shota, who's done a really great job, but who's pitching in the United States for the first time in his career. New league, new country, all of that. So that burden switches to all of these guys. Now, it would be nice if Justin Steele can come back, but like you said, coming back from an injury, you are not just going to immediately expect him to be throwing 8 innings, 105 pitches, and just rolling through things. You need him healthy and back in it for the long haul of this season and his career. So much like Taillon, nice outing, but we're going to cut it short at 73 pitches. It's going to be similar when Steele comes back. Like you said, might be a few starts before he's like, all right, we're taking the training wheels off. We're letting it loose. This start from Kyle looked a little better. There was a lot of weak contact and there was some better stuff, but we did see more of the same in that when he makes mistakes, Brendan, they are murdered, just absolutely murdered. His command is not consistent inning to inning. And you went through last week and we talked about, well, his velo on his fastball is still where it has been when he's had a lot of success in his career. Breaking stuff still looks pretty good, but this is not working. Now with Taillon back, Steele, you're probably still another couple weeks away. It's
get into it, Corey. Stop
situation.
sugarcoating this.
It's a tough situation.
Yeah.
I love Kyle Hendricks, but this is not a sustainable model, especially because you do with Wicks and Assad, when they go short, Brendan, these guys are growing. They're learning how to be starters. This is the first time they've broken camp as starters in an MLB rotation. They're young. Kyle Hendricks is not. So the patience that you have for those guys, you know Kyle's pedigree, but you don't have that same patience with them. And this is now every start, short, 5-6 innings you need from the bullpen to cover, putting the offense behind the 8-ball. This is not a sustainable thing. Now, I'll turn it to you. I'll see what you think. At this point, so now you have Taillon back. You obviously have Shota. You've had Ben Brown start some games. You have Jordan Wicks. You have Javier Assad. So there's some options here. What do you think about Kyle Hendricks? What would you do as we continue through this rotation? And I will say before, just last thing, was reading a tweet from friend of the podcast, Matt Clapp, on Twitter. The next few teams that would line up for Kyle's offense, good luck to Kyle if things don't get ironed out. I saw the Braves in there. I know the Red Sox were in there. Like, he's going to have some good hitters. He's going to have to try to figure out if he's going to continue in this rotation.
Kyle is part of a group of pitchers that requires the Cubs to test and use to hit extreme outcomes. Right now, the Cubs are projected to win 84, 85 games. Right now, the Cubs have a group of pitchers who can be considered quite volatile, both in the starting rotation and in the back end of the bullpen. For example, Javier Assad's looked great. I have confidence in Assad. I love his stuff. However, he's shown in the early goings an inability to get through the 5th and 6th innings. Jordan Wicks, ecstatic about his development. Great slider, great cutter, curveball is developing, changeup's phenomenal. He too has had difficulties in early going deeper into games. Now, there's a few different perspectives here. Kyle Hendricks should be DFA'd right now. That's an extreme decision. Now, the intention or the idea with that is, well, he's giving up home runs. His ERA is 10 to 12. Anyone but Kyle Hendricks is going to be better. Now, the counter to that in DFAing him now is, well, Kyle also presents one of those extreme high outcome possibilities. If you remove Kyle Hendricks from the equation, what do you lose? You lose a potential outcome, which means your extreme outcomes are pooled from a shrinking pool. Extreme outcomes from Assad, Wicks, the bullpen. We're talking about Yency Almonte, Jose Cuas, Leiter being extended. So if Hendricks is removed from this possible outcome list, then you're moving Assad up into the rotation, assuming he can go every 5th day, or if not every 5th day, once every 2 weeks. You're relying on him to be predominantly a starting pitcher. What does that do to the back end of the bullpen? Now, early going, Hendricks looks awful. He's saying himself, he's not giving his teammates a chance to win, and it's killing him. This is not sustainable. He knows it. Now, if you look at what he did today, he himself said he executed his command better. It was baby steps, but it's not where he wants to be. Nevertheless, there was progress. Now, does this mean the Cubs should skip Hendricks, take him out of the rotation right now? Well, that's going to be a decision for the pitching staff and council, but the alternatives don't appear obvious. If we're talking about projections and trying to confidently say, okay, this person is going to give the Cubs the best chance to win both now and within the next 2 months, I don't think you can convincingly say that the next alternative is going to do that, given the potential outcome for Kyle Hendricks. So as the next start or 2 starts go, we're looking in on that dialed in command, and there may come a point soon that you have to skip Hendricks. Of course, similar to what you did with Taillon last year. Skip him, get him back right, and see if that's the way forward. But at the very least, what's undeniable is that the Cubs need to hit on the extremes to be a playoff team. By removing Hendricks, it would shrink down that pool of extremes. It would make probably the front office uncomfortable. And going forward, it would require differential roles that may be a little bit ambitious for certain guys. So my perspective is it is a little bit too early, but I am not thrilled with what I'm seeing. At the same time, I'm not overly concerned about stuff deterioration, but I'm a little concerned about the command, of course. There's encouraging and discouraging trends. And of course, last week, Cody came on and got a little hot. I understand the angst by it. I understand the angst by Eli and other people in the chat. It's not acceptable. Like, we need to have deep starts, and Kyle is definitely not doing that right now. So I understand it, but I'm trying to get myself in the mind of the pitching staff, Craig Counsell, and everyone else. And I'm trying to understand the process. And I can't personally argue against taking Kyle off this roster because it is going to create greater stresses and pressures on certain other pitchers.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, and I think part of it is trying to, as usual, we're trying to sort through what is the logic between what they're actually doing, because he keeps pitching. So for everybody that's like, it's so easy, just DFA him, he should never be pitching, blah, blah. Well, Craig Counsell and Jed Hoyer don't seem to think so, at least right now. So we're trying to figure out what is the reason that they think that, and deeper than that, because obviously the people getting paid, 9-figure salaries to make those decisions have not reached that conclusion yet. And some people will say, well, it's because they paid him 16 million, so the Ricketts won't let them. I don't know.
I will say, though, that the 16 million is representative of what they believe Kyle can do. It's a significant amount of money, pushes him towards a luxury tax. They were impressed by his 2023 performance and believe that's enough reason to think he can retain that in 2024.
Yeah, I don't know. I think if Steele was back tomorrow, you couldn't convince me that letting Kyle keep one of those spots was the right decision, but he's not. And so I do understand the logic of them not necessarily being super confident that a rotation right now of Taillon, Shota, Wicks, Assad, and Ben Brown is the most reliable thing to trot out there. And I think they're desperately hoping Kyle can dial it in. But yeah, nobody's going to sugarcoat it. He looks awful. These results are totally unacceptable. He's killing the bullpen. Not just him, but he has in each of his starts. And when you see those mistakes, you saw it on the Sanchez homer today. They're not just taking advantage of mistakes. This is one of the worst teams in the league hitting the ball 460 feet. Some of the results speak for themselves, right? Like that tells you a lot. But the team continues at this moment just not to be in the best position to remove, as you said, some potential options, as frustrating as it is. So, like I said, he's lined up, and I was reading this again from friend of the show, Matt Clapp. He's lined up to face the Red Sox, the Mets, the Padres, who have already knocked him around once, and the Atlanta Braves in his next 4 starts, if they give him those 4 starts. Good luck. You're going to have to figure it out, and figure it out quick, because those offenses are not going to do that. Again, it's an interesting discussion because we did see some of this from Kyle last year. He figures it out. He's notoriously a slow starter in April throughout his career, even in years that he's been really good. But there is no amount of sugarcoating going on here. He looks bad. The results are bad. And yeah, I think so Chicago dude 8888 in the chat right now makes a point that I saw floating around on social media earlier. He lowered his ERA almost a full run after a 4-inning, 4-run performance.
Baby steps, Corey. That's the progress I'm talking about.
That is one way to look at that. Yes. Yeah, so a comment from friend of the show, Greg Huss, who is one of the best Cubs prospect guys out there. If you are unaware of Greg's work, do check it out. He says, for what it's worth, it feels like the anger directed at Hendricks is like something we'd see about a brand new free agent, not a guy who's earned second, third, and fourth chances because of what he's meant to this franchise. So I do agree with that. And I think more than anything, what Kyle has earned is when you talk about him, it should be done so with respect, right? Instead of like, this guy's a bum or et cetera, et cetera. He's earned, even if you don't want him pitching anymore, he should have your respect. He's more than earned that. But I don't know. At some point, you do have to kind of focus your current goals with the performance that you're seeing. You can't defer to past performance all the time and what guys have meant to the organization. And frankly, the people in charge of this organization don't really act that way. They traded a lot of those guys. Like, they got rid of several of those players that meant a lot to this organization. So I think you treat Kyle with respect in how you discuss these things and how you would handle these things, right? But Kyle should not stick in the rotation because he's a World Series hero. And I don't think that's what Greg meant. But I think there's a balance of those two things. You shouldn't speak of him in a way that isn't befitting of a World Series hero. But at the same time, Cubs won the World Series 8 years ago. It is very much like this team is trying to do
They did
certain things.
what?
The Chicago Cubs won the World Series 8
World
years ago,
Series.
2016.
Okay. 2016 Cubs. Okay. Yeah.
But at the same time, you got to go out there and perform. And when we're talking about all these bullpen issues and all this other stuff, Kyle's performances are part that they play into that. And so you can't just defer to the past when these things happen. But it is it's a nuanced issue. Like I said, if it were up to me and Justin Steele was being activated tomorrow to pitch tomorrow, I would stop starting Kyle Hendricks. I would phantom IL him, or I would let him go work on stuff, whether that's in extended spring or whatever he wants. If he wants to go to Arizona, go do that. If you want to go pitch in Iowa, go do that. That's what he's earned, right? Whatever you want, but you got to get it figured out before we keep doing this at the MLB level. Steele is not back tomorrow. So I think they're going to give this another few and see if they can kind of keep moving on some of the better results that we saw today in terms of more soft contact. He didn't walk anybody. He did strike out 5. Same time, though, this was the Marlins. Like, the bar is pretty low, and they ended up doing some damage. So I don't know. It's a tough thing. Again, I'll end and throw it to you, and then we can hit our second ad break. He obviously does not look good. Nobody is going to pretend otherwise.
In the past, when pitchers of Kyle's age start to perform well, it's due to stuff. I'm not going to belabor the point, but your guy, John Lester, at the tail end of his career, was throwing 3 miles per hour slower. Still effective at times, but 3 miles per hour slower. The secondary stuff, as a result, was not as sharp. My former guy, Jake Arrieta, same story. Came back over to the Cubs, throwing 4 miles per hour slower. Cutter didn't cut as much as he used to. Different guy. What I'm trying to understand, which is a question that only the pitching staff knows within the dugout can address, is why is he getting blown up if his stuff looks exactly the same? If in fact the velocity is higher, which it is, why is he still getting eaten up? If the changeup looks exactly like it was to left-handed batters now compared to last year, why is it getting eaten up? The sinker command, of course, is the big culprit. We saw it today on that 460-foot home run. Sinker was supposed to be off the plate. It was center in. It went above the second deck in the bleachers in center field behind the batter's guy. What is causing that? Because it's not similar to what we've seen with older guys deteriorating in years past. And as a result, it does make me think that maybe this can be fixed. If it were a stuff issue, then I perhaps would be very negative with this. But to your point, given that Steele is not back, given that this staff has a flurry of problems right now in the bullpen and going deeper into games, I don't see the best next solution, because I'm equally concerned about the overall staff, even going into AAA to fill this void. So I don't know what to think about this. I do think a DFA, as people are saying, is quite an extreme interpretation, given that the stuff has not quite deteriorated yet.
Fair. So,
All right.
yeah, and to answer, and then we'll hit our second break here. When we come back from our second break, we're going to talk about Christopher Morel, what's going on with him.
Are we
Some
going
other.
over an hour today? Because it's just you and me.
It seems like it. Yeah, we got to talk about
Okay, here we
Taillon too.
go.
What you saw from Taillon.
All
To finish
right.
on Hendricks for some of the, because I see it in our YouTube chat, for those asking, some guys get killed, they get DFA'd. We don't ask questions about it when their ERA is this high. If you listen to what Brendan's talked about in this episode and last week as well, the reason is that the stuff is still there. Whether you want to believe that or not from the eye test, there's in terms of what he's doing under the hood, a lot of it looks like stuff he has made work in the past. Whereas with other guys, they don't have any success at the MLB level. So when they get lit up, that's why they get sent down right away. Doesn't mean it's going to work. It's obviously not working. But
Yeah.
it would be a different thing if he was throwing 84 miles an hour and his curveball wasn't breaking anymore or something like that. It's not really the case. So the Cubs front office, Hottovy, Craig Counsell, they're trying to figure it out because they want to squeeze what value might be left in there because they need it. The problem for this Cubs team is that they don't have time for that, So they don't have time to figure this out because the rest of the staff isn't there to necessarily pick it up. If this was a staff like they had in 2016, sure, your fifth starter can do whatever they want because the team is really good. That
Which
is
they
not
did.
the situation right now. So it puts a lot of extra emphasis on how things are going. To be clear, also, I've seen this in the chat as well. I know sometimes get distorted. What Kyle Hendricks is doing right now, he's sitting at around 88, 89 miles an hour with his fastball. That is the peak of where he's always been. I see some discussion that he's lost velocity. That is just not true.
No.
This is about the peak of where he's been in his career. Occasionally he'll touch 90 or 91, but that is not somewhere he has sat. If you go to his Fangraphs page, I'm looking at his fastball right now. His average fastball velocity in 2015 was 89, 88.9 in 2016. Like that's about where he is right now. So those are what the averages are. Again, he touched other things, but that's not where he was sitting. I'm looking at the numbers right now. So just for clarity on that.
Thank
Let's
you.
get our second ad break. Talk about Taillon a little bit and what is going on with Christopher Morel.
Okay. Are you in the market for a new vehicle? If you are, then we have some great news for you. Our partner, Ray Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Fox Lake, is celebrating the Jeep Celebration event all month long. You know what that means? You'll be able to rave about their savings on a wide selection of inventory. For a limited time, lease a new 2024 Jeep Grand Cherokee Laredo Altitude for $439 a month for 39 months. If that Grand Cherokee isn't big enough for you, check out the third row and lease a new 2024 Jeep Grand Cherokee Limited L for $479 a month for 39 months. At Ray's CDJR, you'll always be able to shop one of Chicagoland's largest inventories and drive home with more money in your pocket than you'd expect thanks to Ray's Price Promise. Don't miss out. Shop great deals all month long and save big because Ray's CDJR makes buying a new vehicle more affordable than ever. But that's not all. Just for listening, you can get a free oil change when you mention CHGO at the service center or mention CHGO when you book online at raycdjr/service, but you have to schedule before April 30th. So if you're in the market for a new vehicle, then you have to check out the team at Ray Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram because they are the only team we recommend. Visit them today on Route 12 in Fox Lake. And for more information, visit Ray CDJR in Fox Lake or raycdjr.com, serving the community since 1963. Second break here from our sponsor, Blue Moon. Some beers can say they're brewed for baseball, but only Blue Moon is brewed by baseball. Beer and baseball just go together, and no beer goes better than the one that was literally born in a ballpark. Blue Moon was created at Coors Field in Denver, Colorado. It's the natural choice for opening day and all season long. Bring the ballpark to you with Blue Moon Belgian style wheat ale. It's a one of a kind every time. Get Blue Moon delivered by visiting get.bluemoonbeer.com/CHGO to see your delivery options. That's get.bluemoonbeer.com/CHGO. Blue Moon, made brighter. Celebrate responsibly. Blue Moon Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado.
All right. Back from our second ad break now. Donnie in the YouTube chat says he's drinking a Blue Moon. Cheers, Donnie.
Nice.
Wish you were Drinking that after a nice Cubs W, but not to be. We got, early in the season here, Brendan, we got a few wins on Sundays. So that was nice, but can't do it every time. So
We're trying.
I do want to ask you what you thought of Jameson Taillon. Obviously, his first start of the year, first start back from injury, 5 innings, 3 hits, 1 earned run, no walks, 4 strikeouts, the 1 run coming on a lone solo home run, just 73 pitches. But as we said, easing back in there, making sure he's got it. And I did love particularly get 5 innings, feel good about it, look good. What did you see from Taillon? And specifically, when you look back at some of the things that were causing the struggles last year, are they fixed? Are they still there? What are we looking at with Jameson Taillon? Of course, just one sample into this season.
Taillon said 2 problems last year. First problem, fastball had more arm side run. Said that was an offseason thing that he may address. Second problem that Tommy Hotovy has talked about to us, and Taillon has said over and over again throughout his press conferences, curveball shape was too sweepy, not north to south that he once had when he was a Yankee. When he was succeeding in the second half last year, the curveball shape came back. That's what Hotovy said. Even Hotovy said the development of a sweeper that he used early on and throughout the season that was new may have unintentionally had effects on his curveball. So when I'm looking at Taillon in his first start, because of what Hotovy has said, because of what Jameson has said, I'm looking at his curveball shape as a proxy to figure out if he's likely to be productive in the short going. Now, if you look at what that means, those pitches or anything in between the 2 dashed red lines is where Jameson wants his curveball to be. These are his words. And anything to the right of the right dash line means the curveball sweeping too much. So he wants to make that a little bit more north to south. So then the question becomes, well, did he do that in his first start? The answer is, yeah, to some degree. The curveball shape was a little bit more north to south. It wasn't within that 5 to 7 inches every single time that he wanted, but it did look like his curveballs that were successful last year in just a 1 start. So I do think it's encouraging. If you look at his post-game press conference, he seemed happy, seemed encouraged. So I think we have reason to believe in the short going that we have a good chance of seeing success based on what he has told us and what he believes. Now, if you want to be greedy, which of course I always am, I want that four seam to be a little bit straighter, still had about 8 to 10 inches of arm side run. I would like that to be a little bit more straighter and have more carry. And if I'm going to be super greedy, I would like to have the curveball a little bit more north to south. But if Taillon can just be that 5, 6, 7 inning guy, league average pitcher, that is what this staff needs right now.
Yeah, I thought Taillon looked good, and it was a start the Cubs needed. I mean, obviously, if it weren't his first start, you would have been able to get more length out of him. But that's really what they need, man. Like, obviously, you're hoping that he's able to find ways to be great and a top tier pitcher. But more than anything, they need the Jameson Taillon that they signed, that is a reliable MLB starter, because that is what this team is missing right now. A guy that can reliably go 6, 7 innings. Maybe he gives up 3 to 4 runs a game. And, overall at the end of the year, he doesn't look like a Cy Young candidate, but you need those guys in the rotation. And at the moment, they don't have that, or they're waiting to see if guys can eventually get there. I did see, I think it was Donnie in the YouTube chat asking if one of those graphs was cell cultures. Don't threaten Brendan. He can do that. So,
well, if they were contaminated. So that would concern me. So
he can, I think that's what he does for a living. So don't threaten him with a good time.
In there.
Yeah. So that's kind of the pitching staff. Look, as a blanket thought, they need more length. And it as we discussed, is tough because you have you want to give Wicks, Assad, Shota, Ben Brown the space to grow as MLB pitchers and to learn. And Craig Counsell is managing them in that way. He is taking them out before they face a lineup multiple times, or a third time that he feels is dangerous, or when the pitch count gets high, things like that. And you want Counsell to do that. You want him putting these young guys in positions to succeed, not overexerting them for the sake of saving the bullpen. That's not good for a young pitcher's development and the long-term fit and health at the MLB level and for the Chicago Cubs. The problem is, though, is that those things are tough to square with trying to win a ball game every day when your bullpen wasn't great to begin with. You're missing one of your best bullpen arms, and your closer doesn't seem to have a feel for his pitches, and at the moment isn't your closer anymore. So these are tough issues to square. Now, a lot of people in the YouTube chat have expressed this, and I know you and I would express this. If only someone had thought of these issues before the season started. Who could have predicted, Brendan, that their pitching health and depth might come back to bite them a little early? We'll see. At the same time, as other people have said, this team is 13-9. They're missing their best starter. They're missing probably, possibly, maybe their best hitter, depending on how you want to rank some of these things. They have several guys in the rotation that can only go 5 innings at a time. And, here they are a couple games out of first place. Like they look good. Now, do these issues get solved? That's the thing we have to see as the season goes forward. But you get Justin Steele back. You get Seiya back soon. Hopefully Ian Happ's thing is not a big thing. And we'll see. So it's a tough spot for them to have to figure out. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the pitching staff. You need more length. This bullpen isn't good enough to pitch 4 or 5 innings a game. That's really the simplest way of putting it.
We can go back in time and think, man, if only we signed guys maybe to longer contracts, more expensive contracts that are a little bit more stable in their projections. This is one of the risks that the front office played. The risk is, yes, we're going to accept the possibility of high volume guys working out, but at the same time, we're going to maybe play with some fire, play with guys who need to develop, like Jordan Wicks, Avi Assad, play with fire with Kyle Hendricks, age and unpredictable decline, play with fire with Justin Steele, replicating what he did in 2023. They offset that risk in their minds with high volume. Now, we can go back in time in hindsight after this year and determine if that's the right thing to do. You know my opinion on this, Corey. I don't like to risk that. I understand the high volume. I would have preferred over the past 2 years to give out longer contracts for more stability up front rather than the high volume. But at the same time, I understand their process and it can work out. And even though the starting staff and the bullpen feels so iffy at the time, they are 13-9. We had a question earlier on, I believe it was from Becky. Can they still win 90 games? Baseball is so stupid that absolutely yes. Once you are within that 84 to 85 win territory, you're not really within the realm of impossibility of winning 90 games. It is not a certainty, though. If you want to have that certain, surefire, good feel about your team, then you need to be a 94 win on paper going into the year. That way, as Jed has said, the 30th percentile bad outcome is still likely to be a playoff contender. So we're not there. We're in this no man's land right now. We're riding this roller coaster or riding this wave, whatever analogy you want to use. And we're going day by day. Every Sunday, we have volatile chats over here. You and I question everything on a day by day process. And it can be fun, but it is stressful.
Yeah. Well, and look, I mean, again, there's worse places to be. You can see what the potential issues are with this team. And it's very early. I would be very surprised if Jed were super aggressive and decided to pull the trigger on addressing some of these things this early into the season. But you can kind of see what the potential is. Clearly, this team has the potential to win ball games. They've beaten some good teams. They've won close games. They've blown some teams out occasionally. But you see where the potential issues are. The question is, do you have the guys internally to fix it? Can some of the guys right themselves? And then will there come a time where you make bigger plays to kind of address those things? I'm not sure what those answers are, but it's kind of clear what this team looks like, I think. And a lot of it is what most people expected. At the moment, they're on the better end of those kind of questions and predictions, right? They're 13-9. Could easily not be that way. You could also argue, if not for some blown saves or other things, they have a much better record than this. So It's an interesting spot, but you have to keep grinding it out. Like they're definitely in the thick of it. So tough spot.
I mean, what's your confidence level? Tyler over
In
here
what?
says, just the overall possibility of playoffs where they currently are. We had a comment from Tyler, and he said, we might be in no man's land, but we can evaluate what's been happening and the confidence level of what needs to change. And are we going to do it? And I share that
Yeah, I
sentiment
think I
too.
agree with that. Yeah.
I do not like being in no man's land. We can evaluate what's been happening and the confidence level of what needs to change. It's hard to determine what makes sense right now because the other options
Yeah.
also inspire a lack of
Well,
confidence, and that's the unfortunate reality.
yeah, and it's early. It's early in the season, and as a lot of people have said, the Diamondbacks got hot when it mattered last year to get themselves in the playoffs and play well in the playoffs. The Cubs looked out of the playoffs. We were talking about who they're trading at the deadline last year, and they looked like the best team in baseball when it really mattered and played themselves this close to making the playoffs,
That's how the
keeping
sport
Cody
works.
Bellinger, all that other stuff. So you're one streak away in a good or bad direction. But yeah, I think a lot of people expected that was how this season was going to go. It was kind of going to feel like it was on that tightrope basically the entire time. And so far, that's pretty much what it looks like. So we'll see how it continues. Hopefully, again, they can keep it on the positive end of that tightrope rather than the negative end. But we'll see. I want to talk about some hitters. I know we're over the hour mark. Appreciate you guys hanging with us on this Sunday after a loss. I do see 137 folks in the chat. If you wouldn't mind hitting that thumbs up, that like button for Brendan and I on the YouTube channel, we do appreciate that. Let's talk about Christopher Morel. Brendan started the season about as hot as could be, looking great. That Baseball Savant profile page, just dark red everywhere, looks great. He is in a bit of a funk. His WRC plus now down to 74. Overall slash line on the season, 205, 272, 361. That K rate still in a decent spot at 18.4%. So, not pushing into that disaster area of the mid or upper 20s or 30s, things like that. But he clearly looks in a funk. And we've seen this from him in the past. He is, throughout his career, been one of those hitters that looks like the best hitter on the planet and then the worst hitter on the planet 1 week to the next.
Yeah.
I do see in the YouTube chat, Dansby Swanson also does not look good at the plate.
We'll talk
We'll
about
see
it.
if we can talk about that. Maybe we just go 5 hours. No.
Okay. I got nothing to do.
We have a lot to talk about, and we're going to talk about it.
Everyone's hot. Everyone's super hot right now. Everyone's fired up about this roster.
Listen, like baseball is baseball, and the Cubs have had some good series. They took care of business against a bad Rockies team. They won a series against the Dodgers. They won a series on the road against Arizona. But again, like I said, the Marlins came to Wrigley Field with 4 wins on the season in 20-something games. They now have 6 wins. Not great. It's not what you want when you're playing one of the worst teams in the league. So what I want to talk about with Morel is what is keying this slump. Morel is sometimes a divisive player, and I'll start the conversation by saying I'm a big believer in Christopher Morel. There's at this point nothing he could do that would not have me believing in him and his ability to right the ship, and that you kind of just need to sail through these treacherous waters because he's going to come out on the other side. But what I want to ask you and talk about is what keys these slumps? What is going on that keys these slumps, and how can he work his way out of them?
Well, let me use my own baseball experience playing days to relate to
Great.
Christopher
I love
Morel.
that. Yeah, that's my favorite.
Yeah, but in reality, I think we can point to Morel's development over the past 2 years. When he debuted, we talked about this. Chase rate was better than we expected in 2022. He was a leadoff guy for an extended period of time. That was a surprise to me. Over the past 18 months now, the power has excelled. It's exponentiated, if you will. And in the early going in 2024, the recent adjustment was merging everything together, merging the chase rate, merging the contact rate, and sustaining that high extreme power that we saw in 2023. Now, to your points, I do think when we talk about hitters, including Nico as a recent example, including now Morel and Dansby going through a funk, and at some point in time, Michael Busch will go through a funk as well. I remind myself to, take a step back and we can really get into the nitty gritty details on a day by day basis and think, oh man, should I be concerned about this player? Is this player going to regress? Is he going to revert? Uh oh. And you can feel very, anxious about everything. So when I'm looking at Morel, the two questions I ask is in his slump, is he still making contact? Because that has keyed the early season success. The second question I ask is he chasing? Is he showing the same signs of overaggression that he once showed, even last year during the June and July stretch? So we can go to his profile, look at the last 50 plate appearances, which started Monday, April 8th in San Diego in that series. And the answers to those two questions are first, well, he's making over 70% contact. At his worst in previous slumps, he was 55%. Okay. So contact is actually still quite high, relatively speaking. The second answer is he's not chasing as much still, even during his slump here. Now, is he chasing more than early on in the first week and a half, 2 weeks? Yes. But relatively speaking, in his previous slumps, there's an extreme difference in how they're going about their slumps. So then the question is, well, why is he not performing well? The batted ball profile is not what it was in the first week. All that red you saw is currently not there. But if you start thinking, well, if we're seeing heavy contact and still acceptable aggression, what is the likelihood that he'll get out of it? And because he still is making contact, because we even saw in Sunday's game a hard hit double down the left field line, I would expect that a lot of the early season traits we saw do have some carryover. When I listen to Craig Counsell talk about Morel, he believes that to be the case as well. He used an early season 50, 60 plate appearance sample as justification that there is enough reason to believe that these are sustainable type adjustments. But guys go through funks. Morel did hyperextend his finger in San Diego. To what degree that has an effect is unknown. And baseball ebbs and flows. I'm confident that he can be an above average run producer. I do believe the adjustments we've seen will have some carryover, not the extremes that we saw with the extreme chase rate and contact rate, but to some degree, some overall adaptation compared to years past. I still feel good about Morel. I'm not as concerned as I used to be in the middle of 2023 when he was going through those funks because he's still making better than before contact and not showing the hyper-aggression that we used to see.
Yeah, I think you just got to live with some of this stuff with him. I think that's just the case with a guy like Christopher Morel. I think he's looked a lot better on defense. I think he's looking a little more comfortable over there, so that's good to see. And you're going to have to play it by ear with the offense. But he's going to go through these slumps. We've seen this before, but the under the hood stuff looks good. And yeah, he's too talented a player, and he's looked really good at the plate. And I think you can see some of the adjustments that he's made and what it's paid for. This is just not a good stretch for him. But like we saw with Nico, he'll come out of it. You have a good week, you get those numbers back up, and I think things will kind of sort themselves out. A guy that I do want to talk about who I'm just really enjoying to start this year, Miguel Amaya, Brendan. Miguel Amaya, I think, looks really, really good. And it's been interesting to kind of look at how Craig Counsell is deploying the playing time. I'm not sure what I expected coming into the year, but the split in the games that Gomes is starting and Amaya is starting, definitely much more closer to even than I would have thought, or I would have expected.
Same.
But I like it. Miguel Amaya looks really good. He looks good behind the plate. I think the pitchers like throwing to him. And I love Yan Gomes. Yan Gomes has been great for this team. The pitchers rave about throwing to him and the way that he calls games. But of course, he is on the older side. And at some point, you have to figure out how you're going to proceed on at the catcher position. And it's really exciting to see that it looks like Miguel Amaya is that guy. Because for a while, that was not a clear thing. He's worked through a lot of injuries. He's worked through struggles at the minor league level. And, right now, like, he looks like an MLB starting catcher. And that is an important development for this team, not just for this year, but as you go forward in roster building.
I think there's two reasons for Miguel Amaya getting more playing time. The first, as you mentioned, Yan Gomes has really struggled right now going into Monday has a WOBA of 205, batting 176, one home run, no walks in 34 plate appearances, striking out in almost 40% of his plate appearances. So the offense has been quite bad for Young Gomes. Amaya, on the other hand, making more contact, more power that we're seeing. Also young, maybe has some growth development that Council wants to unlock with greater and more consistent playing time. I think the difference between the game calling ability, even though Gomes is one of the best, it might be shrinking due to that education with veteran pitchers and being around young Gomes now for almost a year. I like it. I do think Gomes will need to contribute in the form of offense. This
Yeah.
team does need Yan Gomes to get back to some of those stretches we saw last year. And it would be kind of foolish to expect that Miguel Amaya will be this guy we're seeing for the whole entire year. As we talk about the pitching staff needing to rebound and get deeper into games, I do think we need to see Yan Gomes come back for the sake of the Cubs being long lasting and stable at the catcher position throughout the entire year.
Yeah, but I do think, in the early going, and we saw this last year too, but the development of Amaya as a major league option, and I think on a lot of teams, he would be their starting catcher just with the way that he's hitting at the plate. And he still has some, some growth, I think, to do on the receiving. But he's a young guy. So there's a lot of time for that. But his development as an option for this team at a position that is not easy to find suitable options at the major league level, that's a very helpful one. And if you're someone who is often concerned with the Cubs pinching pennies and how close they are to the luxury tax, let me tell you something. If they can find a guy that can be their starting catcher at some point going forward, that's in, arbitration, pre-arb, wherever, that's great. That's great news. That's one position that they can maybe lock that down in going forward. But I do think that is an exciting development. So
Yeah.
I think that was all the guys that I wanted to talk about.
You don't talk about Dansby?
Sure. I mean, what do you think? I mean,
What do you think?
with Dansby, I mean, look, he doesn't look good right now at the plate. But we've talked about this before. Like Dansby is not a guy. I think a lot of people square too much with the contract he was given, with what they're expecting on offense. I will say he's also, there's been a little bit of uncharacteristic mistakes on the defensive side. That throw today, the error on the road trip, whatever. But he's a multi-time Gold Glover for a reason. You see it all the time that he's one of the best defensive shortstops in the league. He's going to continue to do that. He's not a guy that I'm looking at to be providing a ton of offense. And I think some folks will because of the contract he was given, the way he talks about wanting to be the guy, the face and all that. But he is who he is as a hitter. And I'm not expecting him to carry that load. And I think that's another one where it's like, you have to look at the way this roster was built. It's not Dansby's fault that this team doesn't go out and acquire superstar hitters to put in the middle of their order. Like he's sometimes being asked to be a hitter that he is not necessarily. So I don't really think that much of it. He's obviously in a slump that, you need him to come out of. He's got to be better than this, but he will be. But he just isn't, he's not that guy. So, and, some people are going to, again, talk about the contract and this and that. He is who he is. Like, if you're expecting different, I don't know why. Like he's not a 140 WRC plus kind of guy. He never has been. He's not going to be.
That was always the fear when we were talking about him in 2022 during the winter meetings, that he would be the only addition to the offense because we need pop. To Jed's former phrase, good teams blow other teams out. And Dansby's offensive profile doesn't suggest that he would give the team that boost to blow other teams out. So, of course, because right now the Cubs don't have that clear-cut run producer, the contract is going to be put on Dansby's shoulders to boost that offense. Now, if you look at their earlier returns on this season, if you just project his on-pace wins above replacement, he's still on pace for a 3.8 WAR. That's due to even his offensive production, which does need to improve. but also due to base running, also due to defense in the early going. Yes, he's made some uncharacteristic errors, but it is a delicate balance because he's so good. When he makes an error, it is magnified. And right now, his outs above average is still in the 85th percentile. So he's still making well above average plays than your shortstop. Dansby has gone through weird adjustments in his career. Debuted heavy contact guy, made his name in Atlanta by hitting more home runs, whiffing more, sacrificing contact for slug. With the Cubs, it's kind of reverted. He's trying to make more contact and doing so, sacrifice to power. And we're kind of seeing that in the past year and a half. But even going into Sunday's game, Dansby's line was a 100 WRC plus, a 319 weighted on base average, a contact rate that was well within line of the last 3 seasons, and making plays defensively, even with some of those uncharacteristic errors. So this is who he is, and for $26 million per year, if you're into the whole dollar per WAR argument right now for a 3.8 win season, that's the equivalent on the open market for $38 million. So in a way, if you're concerned about the money, he is living up to the value given everything he provides. And even the people may scoff at it, but even the clubhouse leadership in a way that allows others to adapt and adjust. For example, before I turn it back to you, Christopher Morel's defense has improved substantially over the past 2 weeks. He's feeling more comfortable. Is that long lasting? Who knows? We'll see. Why is Christopher Morel performing better? He was asked this. His response, Dansby Swanson's helping me. Okay. So, in one way, Dansby Swanson's influencing another player's wins above replacement. Adbert Alzolay today was asked, what are you doing differently over this last week? And what are you trying to accomplish and change to get through this funk? Adbert Alzolay responded, I sat with Dansby Swanson in the cafeteria today and we looked over a video together. Adbert comes in the 8th inning today. No runs in the 8th inning. Looks as if maybe that might be a confidence booster in the future. So Dansby Swanson, again, leaking over to improving someone else's wins above replacement, if you want to look at that. So it's something that you want to see more offense, but he is living up to the contract. He's living up to the value, and an argument is more than that.
Well, and I think, look, like if you're of the belief that Dansby's not worth the contract or he shouldn't be the one guy the Cubs signed, take that up with Jed and take it up with Tom Ricketts. Dansby is who he is, and he got paid based on the value he provides.
And he's doing what he's done the
and
past
he's doing
3 seasons.
Exactly what he's done. Yeah. Nico, they're not the same player, but they are rather similar in a lot of ways.
Nico's trying to copy Dansby Swanson's fashion.
Well, but what I was going to say though is, like, even after this hot stretch, Nico's, where his numbers are, like if these guys are slightly above league average hitters, 105, 110 WRC plus guys, they are so valuable in the game of baseball. And some people don't like to, they don't care about the defensive value or certain things. It does matter. When you have guys that play the defense that those two guys have, they run the bases the way they do. Nico's a much better base runner than Dansby is, but they're both good base runners. They play that defense. If they are slightly above league average hitters, they are really, really valuable players. If you are not satisfied with that, though, that ire doesn't belong on Dansby Swanson. He took the contract for fair value for what he provides. That ire should go to Jed or Tom for not getting those guys who do just provide that offense, so that these guys can be those complementary players that sort of supplement that. That's just how it is. That's how the front office is going to look at it. That's how it is. Like that's just, I don't even know if that's my opinion. I think that's like really just the objective way of looking at it.
It's the it's the contract. It's gonna always draw inks, and it's gonna draw comparisons to Jason.
And Dansby's invited it. He wants that level of attention and scrutiny and stuff put on him, so that he's gonna get it. Like, that's what you signed up for, especially in a city like Chicago. But I think he is who he is, and that value is very, very good to the Chicago Cubs. It's just about what's around it. So I think that's what we have. I think to wrap it up, I did want to add too, from our guy Jared Willis from the ballpark at Wrigley. He did note that Sea's starting some light baseball activities, probably running, some soft throwing, things like that. Good to hear as well. Similar to Steele, it's still a process. You need to go through each of those things and make sure that there's no setbacks, there's no soreness, all this other stuff. But hopefully they can get Seiya back, because the way we saw Seiya hitting, a long way to answering a lot of these other issues. You move everybody else down in the order. You have your thump back to go along with Cody Bellinger in the middle of the order, and you don't have to put that pressure on other guys. But it might still be, a couple weeks, probably something like that. So we'll see. This is pretty much what I expected from this team. I'm not going to lie, Brendan. I think that a lot of this lines up with how we would have thought this season would go. I think, again, I'm obviously happy that they are at the 13-9 portion of that rather than the 9-13 version. Because when you're playing a lot of close games, you're not getting length out of your starters. Your bullpen is basically in a daily state of flux. This season could easily be going a different way. So this is sort of what I expected. They're in a good position, and we know kind of what they need to improve. Are those answers clear? Is that going to happen right away? Well, that I don't know. But Craig Counsell is the man for the job in terms of figuring that out, and we'll see how they make some of these adjustments. And hopefully they get some of these guys back off the injured list soon, and that would make some things a little easier for this team.
This is why I miss spring training, because we're going through these ebbs and flows in the early Aprils, and we're trying to figure out, is this something that's going to last? Should we be worried about this? DFA this guy, bench this guy, call this guy up. It's a roller coaster. It really is, especially when you do this and watch every game on a day-to-day basis, which a lot of diehard fans do, and they live on the edge like that. So unfortunately, with the Cubs being in this no man's land projection, it does give you reason to watch, but at the same time, this is going to be what our situation is for the foreseeable future, where each game feels a little bit heavier than most. I wish we had a 95 win projection and each loss was viewed upon as a rarity rather than a realistic certainty. And that's where we are. It's fun, though, if you want to look at it like that.
Yeah.
If you like the drama, this is it.
Yeah, and I mean some early tests for Craig Counsell in terms of you're dealing with a lot of injuries. You have in late April have had to kind of address your closer situation. You're going to have potentially the decision of what to do with an organizational legend in the starting rotation who has not been getting good results. That's a lot. Welcome to Chicago, Craig. Like, as I said, like Devin Williams or vintage Josh Hader, I know he struggled this year. They're not coming out of that bullpen anytime soon. So you're going to have to figure out how to win those close games in a potentially different way. But there's a lot that has gone well, a lot that has been good for this Cubs team so far. Otherwise, they wouldn't be 13-9. So off day on Monday. I believe. Yes. Off day tomorrow on Monday. And then the Cubs welcome the Houston Astros to Wrigley Field. The Houston Astros, who I believe surprisingly to most people, 7-16 to start this season. Yeah.
Okay.
7-16. So not a good start for the Astros, but obviously we know that is a team that is loaded with talent. So will be interesting to see what that looks like and welcome them to Wrigley Field. If I don't know if people are still on this, but if you have a small trash can you'd like to bring to Wrigley Field, I'm not sure if that's allowed or not, but we can look it up.
Well, you're a Michigan man. You're familiar with those types of cheating things, if you will.
Yeah, and flags fly forever, Brendan. So, yeah.
I hear you. You.
So I think that's all we have for you. As always, hopefully this was a good discussion for you guys, trying to dig into some of these issues and offer our thoughts on what the Cubs might be thinking and how they're operating on some of these decisions. We appreciate, as always, you guys tuning in, everybody in the live YouTube chat. We appreciate all your comments, all your thoughts, all your concerns. If you're listening later, we appreciate you as well. If you are on the live YouTube chat, want to hit that thumbs up, that like button on the way out.
There you go,
We
Corey.
appreciate
comment
that.
right there?
Yes.
All
Thank you.
right, good for you.
Thank you there. The University of Michigan mentioned national champions. Thank you. Appreciate that. Enjoy your off day. Cody, Luke, Ryan will be back with you throughout the week for your pre and post game needs, your off day show on Monday. Brendan and I will be back with you next Sunday. Hopefully a nice week of baseball. The Cubs have 3 with Houston, and then they head on the road for 3 in Boston at Fenway Park. So those are your 6 games for this week. We appreciate it. Brendan and I will be back with you next Sunday. We appreciate your support of the CHGO Cubs podcast and everything going on at CHGO. We will talk to you again soon. And as always, go Cubs.
We all silly like the mayor.